Hey guys, what's up? It's Lynn and welcome back to my library. So I've been away for a little bit. Me and my husband, we bought a condo and we close on April 5th. Our house we've also sold and that closes on April 5th. So we've been in the middle of packing and there's just, it's so much work to move in general, but when you're packing up an entire house, it's very overwhelming. So needless to say, I haven't had a lot of time to film any videos because we've just been spending as much free time as we have packing. But that being said, I did manage to read 4 books in February, and I really was happy with the way that my month turned out. So I'll just get into the books right away. The first book I had started in January, but I finished it in February. Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk by Kathleen Rooney. Now this book is about an elderly woman, Lillian. I think she's 84 or 85, and she lives in Manhattan. And back in the day when she was very young, she was very successful in advertising. She was the highest paid woman in her field at that time, and she worked for Macy's. She decides on New Year's Eve that she's going to take a walk. She loves to walk, really. So she always has a standing reservation at a restaurant on New Year's Eve, and she decides to take a walk there. But she leaves her house early, and she makes several stops on the way to the restaurant, and then when she's done, she takes another detour around the city before she gets home, and she's just, reflecting on her life and the events that happened all throughout that time, because she realizes, she's 84 or 85. She doesn't have much more time left on this earth. So she, looks back at her accomplishments and her failures. I liked this book. I wasn't blown away by it. I know a lot of people really loved it. I think for me, you could tell she was an old lady. She, was very set in her ways, and if something didn't, go the way that she had planned, she complained about it. She was one of those ladies that can be crotchety sometimes. But I did like the fact that, this was set in the 80s, okay? And as she's walking around, she hears, music from the cars going by, and one of them is Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, and she says she really likes rap, which made me laugh because I know when I'm older, I'm gonna be bumping Wu-Tang Clan no matter where I go. That's just me. So I appreciated that. But that being said, there were some points in this book where, it got a little bit heavy. Kind of reminded me a little bit in some parts of The Bell Jar, where, it's just talking about mental illness and everything. But, so I was a little bit sad around those areas. But other than that, it was an okay book. I gave it 3 stars. In February, I always try to read along with Black History Month. So the next book I picked up was The Blood of Emmett Till by Timothy B. Tyson. Now, this is a true story about a crime that happened. It was a lynching that happened in the 60s to Emmett Till. He was 14 years old, and the civil rights movement was already in effect, but it really amplified it because people around the country were horrified by what had been done to this 14-year-old boy. He was visiting family in Mississippi. They went to a store owned by a white man and his wife, and allegations occurred that he had tried to assault this woman. He had made sexual remarks to her. I know he did whistle at her because his cousin gave testimony that he did, but he didn't do any of the other things that this woman accused him of. And years later, she was speaking with Timothy B. Tyson, and she admitted that she had lied about it. But that being said, the events that supposedly occurred, according to this woman, resulted in her family members, her husband's family members, going to his uncle's, I think it was his uncle's house, and kidnapping him and brutally murdering him. Now, he was so unrecognizable when he was found that, I mean, he was identified because he was wearing a ring that belonged to his father, and it was engraved with initials, and his mother really, really took her time looking over the body and making sure that it was her son. But she was such a strong woman, and when the body got back to Chicago, which is where he lived, she insisted on having an open casket so that the world could see what had been done to him. And this amplified the civil rights movement. There was a trial. Naturally, the men were acquitted because they were in the South. It was the 60s. 50s? 60s? I think it was the 60s, I'm pretty sure. 1950s. 1955. So, you know, there was that issue with corruption in the government and the police department. They basically bullied, and I wouldn't even say bullied, but they did, you know, exert their influence over the men on the jury. Because at that time, women weren't allowed to serve on juries, and neither were black people. So naturally, these men were acquitted, and, you know, we all know how that goes. This kind of racism is still happening today, and, I mean, while we have made strides, you know, it's going to take a really, really long time to get past all of this racism, and it's just, it's heartbreaking to me because people are still overtly racist, and it is disgusting to me. I mean, people are people. Who cares about the color of their skin? It just, I don't understand it. Now, when we learned about the civil rights in school, I don't remember them ever mentioning Emmett Till. I could be wrong because I was horrible in school and I had undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't pay attention. Teachers could very well have told us about Emmett, but I don't remember. But this is a very, very important story. I'm glad I picked it up. And while it was very, very hard to read at times, it wasn't textbooky, and it read mostly like a novel, even though it wasn't. And the subject matter was, you know, disturbing. It was uncomfortable, but I gave it 4 stars because it's such an important book. It's an important story that needs to be told, and more people should know about it. So yeah, 4 stars. The next book I listened to on audio, and it was Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is like God to me. I love that man. I loved the book, okay? It 90%, well no, 99.9% went over my head. I don't remember a single thing that he was explaining because it was all Greek to me. And I love science, but you know, I'm not the best student. I didn't retain a lot of information from science classes in school. So most of it I was just like, whatever. But I could listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson talk forever. I love his voice. He tells a really good story. He has a very engaging way of speaking and reading the book. There were 3 things that did stick with me. They're a little ridiculous, but one was Roy G. Biv. He mentioned that, which we all know is the color, stands for the colors of the rainbow. And I don't know. I just love that acronym. And another is the way he says Uranus, which is Uranus. And I don't know which way is the proper way to say it. I know everybody says it Uranus, but I mean, he's a extremely, extremely intelligent man. So then I had myself second guessing, like, maybe I've been saying it wrong my whole life. Maybe most people have been saying it wrong their whole life. So I don't know, but that just struck me as so funny. And then the other one was the Hale-Bopp comet. Now, there's a little bit of a story behind this because my mom, she tries, and a lot of times she says words, she pronounces words wrong. A lot of times she does it on purpose because she knows that it annoys me and my sister, but she called it the Hale-Bopp comet. So when he said Hale-Bopp, I just started remembering the Hale-Bopp comet and how my sister thought that, if you guys remember the Heaven's Gate cult where they drank the Kool-Aid and they all died, she thought that that the Hale-Bopp comet was taking them to the mothership and on to this next life, which cracked me up. But I gave the book 4 stars just because I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. I loved the way he talked. It was very engaging and accessible. If you're one of those people who can retain a lot of scientific, like heavily scientific information, even though it was only 3 hours, and he did a great job of simplifying things, but maybe I'm just not as intelligent as I'd like to think. But yeah, I gave it 4 stars. So the next book I read, which was the last one, and I had never read this in school, which surprised me because most schools make their students read this book, but is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This book surprised me so much. I fucking loved it. Every second of it. You know, a brief synopsis is it's about this Girl Scout growing up in the time of civil rights and dealing with racism, dealing with sexism, dealing with just growing up in general in the South. And, you know, her dad is one of the all-time greatest heroes in modern literature. And he's a lawyer. He's defending a black man who's been accused of raping a white girl. And he's clearly innocent. Clearly, but again, this is the 1930s, and they're in Alabama. So the racism is running rampant, and this man is convicted even though he's clearly not guilty. And it's just about how the town treats Scout's family, knowing that her father and her brother Jem, their father defended a black man. Even though he was innocent, they had already, you know, tried and convicted him in the court of public opinion because of the color of his skin. That being said, this was so well written, in my opinion, and I think Harper Lee had a lot of very progressive ideas for people in her generation about racism and, you know, hating people just because they're different isn't acceptable and things needed to change. And she did that with a lot of humor. I laughed a lot with this book. Scout is just so precocious. She reminds me of me, where she just doesn't listen and she doesn't conform to society's ideas of what a woman should be, or a girl. And I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. So those were the books that I read in February, and I hope everybody else had a great reading month, and I will hopefully talk to you soon. I'm going to try to come up with some new video ideas, maybe some videos for when I'm packing up my books or unpacking them in the new place. Maybe even doing a tag or two, even though I haven't been tagged, but some of them sound like fun, so, you know, I'd like to, you know, try some of those out. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great March, and I will see you guys soon. Bye!